So every pause, every detour, every scenic route adds depth to your voice. It doesn't detract from it. It deepens your experience, your perspective. If you've stepped away from music, from singing, from your voice, you're not alone and you're not behind. If you've come back to singing after a long break, or you want to, this episode is for you. Welcome to Reawaken Your Voice. Are you tired of pushing aside your desire to sing, only for it to resurface again and again? Hey, I'm Lainey, voice and creativity coach, singer and songwriter. If you're ready to rediscover the freedom of creative expression, free from judgment, doubt, comparison, and fear, then grab that notebook full of ideas. It's time to give voice to the songs in your heart. Let's sing. When you've taken some time away from singing, it can be so hard to start again. You know, it's that natural law of inertia where an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Unless, of course, there is a force causing a change, a push, a pull. Now, the idea of force when it comes to singing or creativity is a little bit repelling. You know, we don't want to push and force it. But what if we think about it as a nudge or a pull on our heartstrings? Something within us calling us forward, calling us to sing, calling us to open our voices. What if that force is benevolent and loving? What if that force is the light within us, wanting to come out and shine? What if that force is for good? Okay, that sounds so lovely, but how do we get that momentum? You know, if we're already singing and performing and recording, it's easy to just keep doing that. You know, it's part of what we do, part of our identity. But if we stop and we become inactive, we rest, of course, it's easier to just remain at rest. But is it easier when you feel that pull on your heart, that nudge, that aching within you, that longing and desire to free your voice and liberate the music that you feel beating inside of you? Because there does come a point where it's harder to hold it in. But even with that ache, even with the difficulty of getting yourself back in motion again, even with how hard it can be to start again, it is possible to use that nudge, that gentle pull, as it becomes stronger and stronger, to turn that into momentum. You're not behind. You're not broken. And starting over is not a failure. Breaks are human. they happen. Because life is not always a straightforward path in one direction. There are many detours, tangents, scenic routes that we take in life. And they're all being woven together for our good. Many singers feel guilt for quitting, shame for not being consistent. We're supposed to have that discipline to practice. So when we're not doing it the way we think we're supposed to, it can get really heavy, that guilt and that shame. And then there's this pressure we put on ourselves to make up for that lost time and to get back to where we were and to force ourselves into it. But again, that force doesn't have to come with the weight of pressure. It doesn't have to come with the heaviness of guilt and shame. What if that force could just be the pull on your heart? That inner tugging towards something that is awakening in you and wants to be born. So take a deep breath and let go of that pressure, let go of that guilt, let go of that shame. You don't need that moving forward. All you need is that pull on your heart and that tugging that's calling you forward. Your inaction, your silence, your creative stagnancy, that doesn't mean you're not a real singer, a real artist. It simply means you needed that time, that space. Maybe life happened. Maybe creativity was just resting in that winter phase. As singers, we often compare ourselves to others. We look at timelines. The truth is that art is not a race. There is no finish line. In fact, creativity is non-linear. It doesn't go directly from point A to point B. It's cyclical. There are seasons of creativity. It moves through winter. That's just as important as spring and moving into the summer, moving into the autumn. All of these are seasons of creativity, each one having its own value to the whole. So every pause, every detour, every scenic route adds depth to your voice. It doesn't detract from it. It deepens your experience, your perspective. Just as the seasons change, you change, we change. We are part of nature. I love my nature metaphors. I'll always come back to that. So embrace the season you're in. And if you feel that spring wanting to come through. Like those seeds begin to crack open after the soil begins to thaw. Know that you're right where you need to be. And know that returning to singing again and again, no matter how many times you've stopped and started, or went quiet and emerged again, full voice, even if it takes a while to get to that full voice, every single time you return to your voice, to your art, it is a brave act of courage. Every return is a creative act. You're saying yes to yourself, yes to that pull, and yes to the unknown. But you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting over. You're starting from experience, from wisdom, and from resilience. You know, I have wrestled with this feeling of being behind in so many areas of life at different times. And I know I'm not alone. I know this is something a lot of people deal with. We look at others and their lives and where they are in their creative journey. We compare ourselves. And we tend to compare our timelines to others. And although time in this earthly realm is linear, creativity is not. And what I've learned is that we need to trust the timing of our lives. You know, I've finally come to this place of peace and having some perspective. For so long, I felt behind with growing our family. You know, we had our kids later in life. And there was this feeling of just being behind. But now I look at these two boys and I know they were born exactly when God intended for them to be born. They are meant to be part of this generation. And I wouldn't have been the same mother back then if I had kids, you know, in my early 20s or late 20s or early 30s. I wouldn't have been the same mother. We're right where we need to be. Even if it doesn't make sense. And so in much the same way as artists, the music you create now will not be the same as music you would have created in the past. You're right where you need to be to sing the songs you're meant to sing in this season. You know, there's a song I wrote recently, and I wrote it from the prompt, if it wasn't too late, I would. That's an interesting prompt if you take that and try it for yourself. But from that, I wrote a song. I'm thinking I may start sharing some of these songs and the stories that go with them here on the podcast. What do you think about that? Let me know. You can write me an email. hello@reawakenyourvoice.com. But I think this song in particular speaks to this feeling of being behind. If it wasn't too late, I'd start over. Tear it all down and begin again. If it wasn't too late, I'd swallow my pride. Take a chance like I did way back when. When the sounds ringing through me were pure, long before the pain I'd endured. Long before I went silent and went into hiding, when the path ahead seemed sure. That's the first verse. I'm thinking I may share some more of these on the podcast and the stories behind them, because just the message, I think, speaks to a lot of creatives, artists, singers. But through the process of writing that song, I came to such peace, knowing I was right where I needed to be. Because in the final verse, it goes, "It's not too late to start over, to build something new and begin again. Maybe I'm right on time, and besides, I'm not who I was back then." You're right on time. You're right where you need to be. You are not behind. Every experience that you've had shapes who you are as an artist today. Taking a break from singing does not erase your artistry, your creativity, your musicianship. Your voice is always right there waiting for you. You can come back anytime. Thanks for listening, friend. If this episode moved you or inspired you in some way, would you please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with someone who's been praying for a vocal breakthrough? Until next time, keep nurturing that song in your heart. Lots of love.